This evening we have a subject that is almost certain to become controversial. So I'm going to ask you to think as quietly and carefully as you can and see if perhaps some of the points that I want to make are really more obvious than you might first imagine. We must give a certain background to this discussion because actually most of our concepts of demonism belong to long traditional concepts and beliefs which have endured in our way of life over thousands of years. First of all, I think we should make one rather important differentiation. Most of the demons of antiquity were comparatively respectable creatures. The ancients believed that there were in nature spirits both good and bad. Good spirits they called gods, or elemental beings. Evil spirits they regarded as more spiteful and malicious by their natural intention. And these two orders of invisibles were used to explain a variety of natural phenomena. Going back over the history of primitive demonism, we note that nearly all of the so-called destructive forces were regarded as entities in themselves. They were sprites, or mysterious little beings of nature capricious and malicious. But they operated almost completely according to their own natures. They afflicted or burdened people because apparently they enjoyed doing these things. Irish folklore is full of mischievous beings who seem to like to play pranks on innocent mortals. But there were orders of spirits that were by nature inclined to be malicious or meddlesome. The Greeks generally handled those rather successfully by putting out a little bowl of food or offering a prayer or making some little promise that they would do a favor for the spirit if the spirit would be kindly to them. It was rather a childish state of affairs and never got very much beyond that point. Among Oriental nations, there is an elaborate study of demonism of all kinds. But I rather suspect that we have been somewhat over-influenced by missionary reports. China is supposed to have had more demons than all the firecrackers in Asia could frighten away. But again, these demons did not seem to be particularly ferocious. I think the demonism of Asia was very much like that of Greece. I know that today, in Asiatic countries, there is very little fear of evil spirits, even where they are believed in. They are not regarded as being particularly dangerous. Japan has its little oni, its little goblins, but if you want to get goblins out of the house for the year, all you have to do is throw some beans at them at the Setsubun festival and they depart for the rest of the year. They're really not very tenacious or especially difficult. Now, in almost all countries where Buddhism has been introduced, we have the same consistent story, namely that the Buddhist teachers immediately converted the demons. Demons just didn't have a chance where Buddhist missionaries went out. Even in Tibet, when Padmasambhava converted the country, he converted all of the evil spirits and they all became good Buddhists, and they became servants of righteousness ever after, which would indicate that the Oni, or spirits, were more or less unionized, or something of that nature, and that in their spare time they went fishing, had picnics, and gathered in some quiet bamboo grove and drank sake together. In more modern times, during what has been called the Middle Ages, there appeared another problem that really does not stem from real, honest, good old-fashioned constructive demonism. It is a different brand of this belief, and it has been called diabolism, or black magic, as it has gradually come to be known. Indicates or holds the concept that of two things. First, that evil spirits naturally existing can be controlled or brought into the service of a magician, as in the case of Faust, and that this evil spirit will do the bidding of his master for a certain length of time, sign a pact with him, perhaps sign it in blood. In the European museums and libraries, there are a number of these original pacts, neatly signed in blood. These pacts bound an evil spirit to man for a time. Usually the pact ended by the evil spirit receiving in payment the soul of the magician. This is the classical pattern and is found in many old works on demonology. But during the duration of the pact, this demon was forced to serve his master, to do anything that his master wanted him to do. Now, in a great many of these old books, we find a very interesting line of thought, which seems to indicate that the demonism actually did arise from older beliefs. For we learn that these demons that were bound by pacts really had no interest in hurting anybody. They were not out trying to make the magician do evil things. Mephisto did not have the slightest interest in advancing the whims of Dr. Faust. Mephisto lived in an entirely different kind of world of his own. As the demon, he represented a debonair personality, worldly wise, sophisticated, and attained in all things. To him, Faust was nothing but a child, an infantile ignoramus, perfectly willing to sell his own soul for a few years of glory and a little wealth or the fulfillment of his own desires. And as Mephisto himself tells us, he hasn't the slightest interest in Faust's desires. But because of the pact, he is his servant for the duration of the bargain and must do as he is told. In fact, in a few instances, Mephisto actually intercedes and strongly recommends that Faust not do some of these evil things, which are senseless, meaningless, and purposeless. So in the demonology, it wasn't a case of a demon taking great joy in injuring people. It was a bored demon who had no interest in humanity. He didn't care whether humans lived or died, because he was no part of them. They were not his region, they were not his world. But he had made a bargain, he had signed a contract, he was, so to say, an apprentice to the sorcerer for a while. So he did what he was told and waited patiently until he could inflict final punishment upon the sorcerer himself. This type of diabolism, again, doesn't quite meet the thinking of most people of today. Because here, and this was the typical demonism of the crossroads, where the magic circle was drawn, where the witches of Macbeth brewed their cauldrons, all of this type of medieval tying of spirits, the binding of the powers of nature to the whims of a human being. All of these were based upon a certain power process. There were secret words, there were secret conjurations, magic circles and terms, rites to be performed. And if the magician was able to perform these correctly, he could command the spirit. And if he could command the spirit, then the spirit had to obey him. And the spirit felt really, as several of the old accounts say. One or two of the spirits do, like Asmodeus in one of the early books, says to the conjurer who has called him out of the misty deep for some nefarious undertaking, "Why have you disturbed me? I have no reason to be here. I don't care anything about you. I don't want to hurt anybody. Why have you bothered me? Why have you said these words of power that now force me to obey you? Because you have the magic talismans, the magic symbols. Why have you done this to me? I don't dislike you. I haven't done anything to you. Why do you insist on binding me to some common human purpose of your own?" This was the rather nonchalant idea. It seems to have carried through from the Greek, in which these spirits were simply part of the citizenry of an invisible empire, and really would never bother anybody if humans left them alone.